Well, so Nate has all sorts of goofy excuses for not attending meetings sometimes, and he's gonna use this time to explain to us why he missed a couple of meetings, and has some awesome adventures to share with us, some things I'm envious of. So Nate, do you have your stuff set up there?
Yeah, I think so. So, truth be told, Pete comes to the Y like 6 times a week, and when I'm there, he always stops and we chat for a few minutes, and he wants to see kind of what I've been doing. So he then emailed out and suggested that I do this, and I've been a little reluctant to share photos because I think it's a little boring, but nonetheless, I'm here to do that. So. So this is, what I'm going to talk about basically is just kind of what I've done in 2018 in terms of backpacking and the places I've gone and what I've done. So basically all the photos are me backpacking somewhere and just in 2018. So nothing from back any further. I've been, obviously Washington's easy, Oregon, California, Montana, Louisiana, Alaska, and Utah this year, in 2018.
I have a question. Why would anybody backpack in Louisiana?
I was there for a work conference, and I'll tell that story in a minute, but yeah, there's no reason to go there, it's just... Yeah, so this one is in Denali National Park up in Alaska. I'm going back this summer for a 6-day trip to the base of the mountain, Denali. I'm not climbing the mountain because I'm not a mountaineer, but going out there for 6 days. This is just across the pass over by the gorge, if you're familiar with where that area is. It's at Dusty Lake, if anyone's been out to Ancient Lakes, which is right next door to Dusty Lake. It's one of the few places you can actually have a fire in Washington, so I go there every spring because it's actually one of the few places that is snow-free earliest. So if you don't want to backpack in the snow, if you're looking for like a little family, like low trip, this is like a great place. It's like 2 miles, pretty darn flat. You can put up a tent. There's some nice lakes around. You can't drink any of the water or anything because it's all runoff from pastures, but it's still a kind of fun little place to go. You can see up behind my head there is these coulees, these rock towers, and it's great for rock climbing or bouldering. So I went out there and I go bouldering with a couple friends and climb up some of them. Someone asked why you go out to crazy places. You gotta take some of this with you. So I always take a bottle of something or other with me whenever I'm going someplace because, you know, after a long day of hiking around, it's kind of nice to be able to have a drink. In March of this last year, I went to Zion National Park in Utah, and I did what they call the Trans-Zion hike, or the Zion Traverse hike. And you park your car at the west entrance of the park, and you pay a shuttle to drive you to the east entrance, and then you backpack across the entire park for about 55 miles. And so I went out there and did that with my younger brother.
How many days did that take?
It was 4 nights, 5 days, 4 days, really 4 days with all the travel. You can do it a lot faster. We took our time. This is also in Zion. This particular part of the trail is, you're kind of in between these 2 cliff walls, and you're in this sort of like valley, and there's this river that sort of, you can see this little creek here, but further to the right it's larger kind of river that runs down the center of it, and you can see a little bit of snow on the ground. The sun was out that day. It's probably, this little stretch of maybe 5 miles is maybe my favorite stretch of hiking all year in terms of just like the environment. I didn't see enough, there was no one else out there. There was no other people, but kind of being alone out in the middle of nowhere, it's kind of fun. Also in Zion, you can kind of see just the red rock that it's famous for. Again, great rock climbing if anyone's a rock climber or wants to be a rock climber. Like Zion is like one of the great places to go. And just sort of as perspective as to kind of the walls that you're walking around as you're kind of moving and grooving. Just threw this one in here just so you could see like what that's basically, you pack that tent in your bag. There's 2 of us that sleep in that thing, and that's just one of the tents I take. So that morning you're like in the sun, like getting sunburnt, and in the evening you're into the snow hiking, and so you have this like kind of constant like weather challenge of like staying warm but also being hot at the same time.
Did you get sick?
No. You kind of wake up a little bit with a throat thing sometimes because of the change. But you know, and you also don't want to have like a 45-pound backpack because you know that slows you down and it stinks. So you try to like carry the least amount of stuff as humanly possible. Also in Zion, that was the following day. Maybe one of my more favorite pictures of the year along the trail. You know, it's pretty amazing, especially when you have snow on the kind of hillside and mountainside across the way.
Is that your maps?
Yeah, I'm on my back there. Yeah, I'm like a little bit of a geek when it comes to like the map. It's not for like not getting lost or anything like that. I don't really care about that so much, but it's just like knowing exactly the elevation in the hills and what's coming up, and you know, especially for like gathering water and stuff like that, trying to be able to figure out where you can get fresh water and filter it and stuff like that. So I just like having them. You could easily do this hike without one, but it's just kind of nice to have. Just
You carry a GPS device with you?
no. Why would you want a GPS device?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean,
What time of year is that?
it's in early March, so it's pretty. It was actually pretty hellish because the week before they got a giant snowstorm through the park, and they closed down lots of the roads, and so we weren't even sure we could even get to the trail because the road out to the one area was closed, but they opened it like 2 days before we got there and had plowed it, and so we were able to get to the actual trailhead. So. And in March is nice because it's not quite as busy in the park. You know, you get there in like June, July, August. Everyone's kind of in the main canyon if you've been to the park. That's sort of the main area. So the nice thing about this particular hike is if you've been to Zion, the main canyon is sort of the big feature of the park. And so this is, Angel's Landing, which you might be familiar with, is sort of like this. And there's a photo from here in a second that kind of protrudes out into the center of the canyon. It's the most famous hike in the park, and so lots and lots of people hike up to that every day and do that. This is nice because you sort of start over here, pass through the main canyon where everyone is, and then get away from everybody. So you're only like in the main canyon area where there's a bunch of people for maybe half a day. So you kind of get a chance to get away from everyone. Other than the canyon day, everything else, we didn't see another person. So for 4 days, we didn't have to talk to anyone.
Another person. How about animals? What type of wildlife do you guys see?
On this trip, not so much. I didn't put the photo in here, but there's big old cat prints about like that size in the snow that we follow around sometimes. Here you'll get lots of like, field mice and stuff like that, but nothing major here. There's a couple other times I've run into bobcat, bear, and things like that, but not on this particular trip. Try to do a little night photography when possible, when the clouds and the evening is worth it. So usually like set the alarm for like midnight every night and wake up and get really mad that I'm awake and cold and don't want to crawl out of my tent to do any of it. But if it's nice out, it's sort of worth trying to snap a couple of photos because it's pretty when you're out there without sea lights or anything else to sort of just be able to kind of gaze up at the stars. In this particular one, I didn't have to get out of my tent. I just like opened the zipper and like was still in my sleeping bag, and I just put my camera right there, and I just like set the settings, and I just pushed the button, and I was like, oh, that one sucked. I'll just do a new one, and I just like lay there and have to.
You can use the pause for a clicker.
Oh, can I? Oh, nice. So this is the top of Angel's Landing, which I was talking about. So this is sort of the famous feature of the park. If you've never been there, it's really freaky. Has anyone ever hiked up Angel's Landing here? I love heights, particularly, but to get there, you have to hike up a very narrow ledge where there's some chain link that you can hold on to, and there's sections where there's none, and the path might be as wide as that, and it just drops off on each side of you, and you're up a couple thousand feet, so you're just like a strong breeze, you're like, I'm just gonna like tip over this thing and go tumbling down. The week before we arrived, someone died trying to do this particular section of the hike and fell off, and so they have big signs. They're like, every year people do not make it, so if you're not comfortable, don't go. So not my favorite experience getting there because it's really quite freaky, but to get the view and to be up on top of this is pretty cool. So, and you can see down at the bottom there's that's kind of the road, if you can see that down here, that you can just drive right down the center of the whole park.
What goes up must come down. We're going to do the same thing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so it's a couple thousand feet up, and so then once you hike up there, you got to turn around and hike back down
Is
to
it
the
a
bottom.
different trail going down, or do you pass?
You go right back the way you came, and then just down to the bottom of the canyon.
Pass it along there?
Correct, yeah. So yeah, you definitely are like, there's a section where it was maybe, there's no ropes, there's nothing to hold on to, and I don't know, maybe this wide, and there's 2 people trying to pass, and so you're just like, okay, I'm going to stand here, and you're going to walk by, and neither one of us is going to touch each other, because if we do, we might just like tip over the edge, so. Also at the top of Angel's Landing, kind of a cool shot of a horseshoe bend of the road. So it's a little freaky to like lean over the edge and try to snap a photo, but it's kind of worth it.
So that's a highway down there.
Yeah, it's the park road, so it's 1 lane each way, and so you have to pay to get into the park, and you can just drive this particular section. So we hiked. So we're up on the east rim of the park, and we hiked down, and then hiked up to Angel's Landing, and back down, and back to the bottom of the park. We walked on that road for about 3 miles down the road, down to this area, and then hiked up the west side of the canyon to get back out of the area. So this was in Louisiana, so that's, oh sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, what was the elevation gain in that previous picture from the road up to Angel's?
Yeah, it's like 3,600, I think, something like that. So I mean, pretty decent, but and the thing too is it's not 3,600 over like 5 miles of a trail. It's like, it's pretty much just straight up, so you're just like stair-stepping it all the way up with maybe 35 pounds on your back. So I was at a conference in New Orleans, and so it ended on Friday like at like 10 or 11 in the morning. So I went to the airport and got a car and drove 3 hours up to the Kisatchie National Forest and did about a 35-mile, 3-day little loop hike that I was down there for. So it's a little more swampy. There's no like high elevation photos.
Not in Louisiana.
I saw
Off
like
ramp to the expressway is that high point.
a big black. This had to have been like 5 foot long or more black snake that just like freaked me out, and like I just don't even like want to. I was waiting for like eyeballs to pop out of the water and stuff like that. And I did this one solo. I didn't have anyone who wanted to stick around and do that with me, so
You blame them?
No, it wasn't my favorite hike that I've ever done, but it was still pretty in its own way. So I don't know that I'm ever gonna plan to go back.
Did you see any alligator?
I saw one, but it wasn't close, so it was off a little ways. As I mentioned, Ancient Lakes, again, just right across the pass, a couple hours away. It's, again, a great place to go if you're just looking for like a little thing to do. You can have a fire, try to get artistic at some time. After enough whiskey, I'm like, I can already photo.
It's like you text on fire.
Yeah, so.
But that happened.
So anyways, it's a good place to check out if you're just looking for something. This is up over near Leavenworth at a place called Estes Butte. Not a popular hike at all. I didn't see anyone for the day. I went up just one day and back down, so it was just one overnight. And again, solo, because none of my friends wanted to do it. I don't know what was going on, but they were busy. So the reason I added this photo is I'm by myself, and so I have I have a camera that I take with me, and so I set it on this ledge, and I put the timer on for 10 seconds, and then I had to run and jump over to that ledge to like get up there and stand and try to get the photo all at one time.
Good job.
Excellent.
And I didn't fall, and I had to pose, and I had like 3 seconds, so I'd get down like, okay. There we go, and photo. So. But it's, I mean, the good thing about about a trail like this too is it's really not frequent at all, so it's a little bit more of an adventure because it's not really obvious where you're going because it's not a well-worn path. So you're sort of like, I don't know if this goes left or right here, and there's no like real obvious sign as to where it goes. So you sort of just go, I think it feels like it goes left.
So, is that sunset?
Oh yeah.
How long's this hike?
I think it's maybe about 5 miles up, 5 miles down.
And you said you did this in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So you went 5 miles back in the dark?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I spent one night on top.
Oh.
So it was one night, 2 days.
Okay.
But hiking in the dark is something I do all the time. Yeah, I mean, constantly. It's pretty much, you know, if you want to get a lot of miles in a day and cover a lot of ground, and you do that anytime that's not in the middle of summer when the sun goes down early, you better be hiking by like 6 a.m. or 5:30, and you're in the dark for sure. So this is up in Alaska as well. This is, when I was up there, I did a 3-day, 2 nights on this trail called the Crow Pass Trail, which is like you hike up to a mountain pass, and there's a big old glacier up there, and you pop over this glacier and you kind of work your way down into this valley. And the main feature, which I didn't put anything in here about it, is there's this river crossing that's maybe 40 yards wide, this river, and it gets to maybe about waist deep, and it's glacier runoff water, and so it's like ice cold, and so you have to forge this river to keep going. And so that's like the main point to go to this particular place.
Take waders with them? I mean,
No.
no?
No, you just go. I took a different pair of shoes so I could keep my boots from getting completely soaked, and you just hike it all up and you just go for it. You know, it is like they do. You know, before you go, you have to meet with like a ranger and all that, and they warn you that people, if they trip and fall, they'll be swept down the river and get hypothermia, and it can get pretty scary. So they try to tell you to be careful, but you know, end of the day, it's your choice on how you want to manage the process. If you are Facebook friends with me, you can find a video on my Facebook of me selfieing as I go across this thing. I took a video of me doing it.
Is this a solo hike also?
No, so I had my younger brother who at the time was still living in Seattle. He likes this type of stuff too, so we were up to go together. Yeah. The other thing about this particular hike is that you're really in bear country, so it's like pretty common to run into bear, and it's not a trail like you might again be here where you're like, oh, it's really clear and defined. It's like a lot of overgrowth, and so you're always constantly concerned that you're going to push through this overgrowth and there's going to be a bear just like right there, because it's kind of some areas are so overgrown that you might be pushing through, you know, the brush for 50, 60 yards, and you know, it wouldn't be hard to come across something that didn't hear you as you're trying to make noise and let them know you're on your way. Also on that same trail, kind of heading that direction down the mountain, we ran into a moose on the trail, and they are, I don't know if you know anything about them, they're very mean. They're like worse than bears, like way worse than bears. They will definitely like charge you down, and they kill more people than bears every year. So a moose is a little scarier than a bear, and it was like right in the middle of the path, and there's like we had to sit there and just wait as it like finally like grazed itself across the path and got far enough away where we could get around it without it getting spooked by us. This is over at Glacier National Park in Montana. So I went solo on this trip because my itinerary was a little bit of a interesting choice. I left right after work on Thursday night at like 7 p.m. and I drove through the night. It's like maybe 9 or 10 hours. So I got to the park at like 5:30 in the morning the next day, and I didn't have any permits to be in the backcountry because I just sort of did this spur of the moment. And so I had to go to the permit office, and they didn't open until 7. So I slept in my car for like half an hour, and then went to the permit office, got random permits for this random trail that I didn't know anything about, and then drove another hour to get to the trail, parked my car, and did a 8-mile hike to where I was gonna set up camp that day. So as I'm hiking, I have been up for 30-something hours essentially, and I'm just like exhausted, but I'm like, there's no choice but to get to where I'm going. And the worst part of that is that it was in prime grizzly country, like literally every 5th tree had big old, claw marks from the bears, sharpening claws, and there's lots of bear scat everywhere. It was probably the most bear obvious area that I've ever probably been through, and so it was a little nerve-wracking to to be hiking through there, as well as no one else is on the trail. Like, this isn't a very popular trail either, which is why I could get a permit last minute to be there, and so I didn't see anybody the whole time either. So, but anyways, got a little ocean or a lake mountain shot. Gives a little same place on that same trail, crossing this little river, and kind of sun breaking through the trees there. So then I went to Yosemite National Park in end of September of this last year, which is Yosemite is like an obsession of mine. I don't know if anyone who's been there, but it's breathtaking to be there. The big face on the left is El Cap, which is a very famous rock climbing wall, maybe the most famous in the entire world. If you've seen a movie called Free Solo, or like there was a movie that came out very recently about someone who climbed that wall without a rope for the first time ever. And is literally incredible, crazy. We did about a 40-mile hike through the park, and this is Half Dome back here, which is also a very famous feature of the park. And we hiked from the other direction, and I have a photo from us up top of here, and then we hiked down to the valley floor eventually over a couple more days. This is again in the park. We camped right alongside of this lake, and it was pretty with the sun going down and the reflection of the mountainside there. This is Cathedral Lake for anyone who's familiar with the park, and this is Cathedral Peak, which you can climb, but we didn't do that on this trip. It's just another trail photo of Yosemite. Sunset from up on top of Cloud's Rest. So this is about 9,000 feet up, and so it's probably the best place in the park to see a sunset. You have Half Dome is here, and El Cap is here, and this is the valley. And when the sun goes down over the edge of the mountains on the far side, it's pretty spectacular. And so we hiked. We had a little base camp that we set up at that night at the bottom of this particular hike, and then we hiked up to Cloud's Rest, did a sunset, came back down, slept, then hiked back up because we had to keep going the next day. This is on Half Dome. Easily, not this photo, but this experience, to get on top of Half Dome is easily the scariest thing I've ever had to do. For those who've ever climbed Half Dome, it's a long hike. It's tough to get to the base of Half Dome, and then it's about 600 yards to get to the top of Half Dome, and it's about like that. And they put 2 cables, like big old cables that run down the side of the mountain, and you don't have any harness or anything, and you just like grab on and you just pull yourself up to the top of this thing, and it is freaky.
Is that you out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty slippery. I mean, it's granite, or no?
Just granite the whole way.
Yeah, the whole way. And it's not like super totally smooth, but people have been walk on it a lot, so it has like slipped it, made it a little slippery. And so as you're going up, people are coming down, and so I again don't love heights, so you kind of have your hands like this, and you're pulling yourself up, and then someone's coming down. Well, you gotta let go, because like, someone's gotta get past you. So you're just like, okay, so you just like grab this one rope and you're just holding on like this as people are like passing you going this direction, and you're just like, okay, this is stupid. But yeah, then there's they call these like diving boards, which are like these, you know, kind of overhanging stone on top of large cliffs. And so I crawled out there, and a couple of friends who were with me took a shot.
A couple of smart friends who would go out there.
No, they all went out there first. I was the last because I was like, I don't really love this at all, but I want to push my own boundaries, and you know, if you don't try new things, then what's the point? So I pretty much hyperventilate at the bottom of this hike. I was like, I don't think I can make it. It's too freaky. But then they forced me to. So,
Good friends.
yeah, basically. My younger brother and my friend Jake were with me. My brother was like, yeah, I don't care, you're gonna go. Like, you're not gonna not go. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go. He said, no, you're going. So they didn't give me a choice. They pretty much forced me to go up. So.
You don't have to go with us, but they tend to boozing with
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I have all the stuff, so I mean, and you drop like your backpack and stuff like that, so you're not like carrying all that weight up on this particular section, and then you have to climb back down. I have a video of, not me, my brother took it because I wouldn't let go of the ropes, but he is much more comfortable, and so he has some video of climbing up and down this thing, and it's pretty stupid. Yeah, I don't. The last kind of thing I did this year was, I'm sorry if I'm running over time here, Redwoods National Park in Northern California. So at Christmas this last year, I usually go home at Christmas to Ohio to see my family. For various reasons, I didn't go. So since I don't have family here and I didn't really want to crash anyone's Christmas parties, I decided I'd go on a little like 3-night, 4-day little backpacking trip of my own. So I went down to the Redwoods National Park in California for a night, and hiked out to the ocean because it's actually quite beautiful out there. At that time of year, there was like no one else out there because no one else is interested in backpacking 2 days before Christmas, I guess. So beautiful sunset right over top of this grassy knoll area is the ocean, and kind of hung out at the ocean for a little while. They had lots of elk running around the park. I guess I didn't realize that either. I guess I didn't really know much about the redwoods, but they had elk, and so we ran across a handful of those guys. The redwoods are known for tall trees, 300-footers, basically some of the tallest in the world live there. There's basically 2 sections of the park that haven't been cut previously, so there's not a ton of really tall trees left because it's all second growth or third growth at this point. But there are a few sections where you can see some, 300-foot tall trees, which is pretty. And they're not like sequoias, which you see in the other parks where cars can drive through the trunks. They're not like that at all. They're still massive, but they're not really wide. They just grow really tall. So it's interesting to kind of walk among them. I always like having the sun kind of bust through the forest. This was Christmas Day. I went up to Oregon to Smith Rock, if anyone's been to the Smith Rock State Park, I guess it is technically. Again, super rock climbing area, really it's what it's known for more than anything. And so Christmas Eve I got there and set up camp, and there was no snow, and so the next morning I woke up to some snow, which was kind of nice for Christmas morning, and I hiked up basically up to here the next day, up on top of this little peak up here, and then hiked back down and around. Just back to I just threw this at the end, back down, this is back in Alaska again, when I was in this is in Denali. It's pretty spectacular, I can't wait to kind of go back. And then that is the mountain itself.
You got to see it.
Yeah, it's just pretty unusual. It's only like maybe that uncovered about
30 days a year.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's pretty much cloud covered all the time. This is from maybe about 100 miles away, so it's it's pretty far away. It's still pretty massive. Not as tall as Everest, but it's wider than Everest, so it's actually a very wide mountain. So when you go to climb it, it takes longer than you would suspect because you spend so much time going, laterally to get to the top, essentially. And then I had to. Whoops. This is me back at Dusty Lake doing a little bit of bouldering, climbing. So, yeah. So, bouldering is like anything maybe 40 foot and under without a rope, essentially. You just are free climbing the rock face. Relatively easy here, but person I was with did fall. Not on that one, but. And then I have to finish, because it's the same photo as before, but you have to finish with alcohol, because that's half the battle, is you gotta have it out there with you, so. I have maybe 4,000 photos from the year, so I like try to quickly pick up like 30 of them. I don't know if these are even the best ones, but this is in the time I spent on it, that's the most I could find, look at, so.
Do you have an interest in the PCT?
Yeah, if I could have 3 months off from work to do the PCT or any of the like
Sections
longer
of it?
hike, yeah, I've done sections of it, yeah, but I'd love to be able to do the whole, from Mexico to
That seems like the
Canada,
most
but
fun, right?
yeah, it does seem fantastic, but you need 3 to 4 months to
Yeah.
do it, and maybe when I'm retired or something, I can maybe go after it, so.
And Nate, you never watched the movie Revenant, right?
Oh, I have seen it, yeah.
You know, it's a lot of bear attacks.
There is a bear attack, yeah. You know,
Crazy.
I maybe I should be more afraid of animals than I am, but like, I don't know. Like, the chances are so slim, and if it happens, like, I guess that's the way I'm meant to die.
Well,
I mean,
make sure you get a GoPro and run on a loop for us.
yeah. Just so you can see the bear, like, charging at me, and being like, yeah, it's fine, it's just a bear. Yeah.
The worst he sees is the Y every day.
Yeah. So, you know, and for the most, like, you know, I know people get a little freaked out by bears and I guess mainly bears, but you know, you rarely run into them and they don't care about you half the time anyways. They're interested in anything else, so.
Any
Great.
questions?
Any questions? That's.
So we do have a fundraising event scheduled next weekend. Nate's going to lead us on a hike. We're leaving at 6 o'clock for Mount Baker. Overnight trip, if anybody's interested.
Well,
No,
I've been.
sorry,
Well,
sorry,
you
we
know,
tried.
the Y fundraises money by having people climb to the top of Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
So, you know, if anyone wants to really support my climbing, you can give me money, not go climb Rainier.
Have you been up to Rainier?
No.
Yeah.
Someday.
All right. Anything else before we part ways this morning? All right. Thank you very much, Nate. Thank you a ton for taking the time to do that. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you guys, many of you tonight.